Welcome back to Doing Outdoors. I'm Benj and we're in the garden today. We've got to get the onions planted out that we started in the greenhouse up the land. I've just prepared a bed for them to go into in my allotment plot. I've scattered it with well rotted compost, dug it over, raked it to get as fine a finish as I possibly can. I've just been up the land, fetched the onions, and I've given them a drench. So I've got two types of onions to plant today. One of the varieties, half of the tray, I planted out into these modular pots to see how well they'd do in relation to not planting them out and keeping them in the trays. How I've grown onions in the past was just to grow them on in the trays until they were big enough and then prick them out straight into the ground where they're going to grow on. But I thought I would try putting them into modular pots first as a bit of an experiment to see if we get any better results. Obviously it's more time consuming to put them into these modular trays, but if we get bigger and tastier onions, it's going to be worthwhile. So just comparing the onions that were grown in the tray and left in the tray to this is the same onion but planted in the modular pots. They're looking a lot healthier. They're easily twice the size, if not 3 times the size, and this will be because the roots have had a lot more room to grow. Each plant isn't competing for the same amount of water or the same water and nutrient that they're all growing in. They're all got their own individual cell. So far it would appear that pricking them out into these modular cells is going to be beneficial. We'll pop one out in a minute and see what the root systems look like. These should still do okay. I've got every faith that these will catch up, but only time will tell. So we're just going to pop one of these out, see what the root system's saying. Well, you can see just in the bottom, the roots are just starting to peep through. And there we go. Looking good. They can go straight in the ground now with minimal disturbance to the roots, so they should continue growing very well. Whereas these that we're going to have to prick out, they're going to lose some of their root system in the process of being parted from their neighbour, which will stunt their growth a little, but they could still catch up. So for these first couple of rows, we'll plant the modular raised onions. They're looking really good. And I get about 20 onions to a row. We've got 90 or just under 90 of these. So we'll get 4 rows, maybe a little more. Might be able to squeeze them in a little bit tighter. So we've got all the onions that were in the cells put in the ground. We've got 83 in. There were a couple that were quite small that I didn't want to bother with, so they've gone onto the compost heap. So now it's time to get the ones out the trays pricked out, and to get these in the ground we're going to use a dibber. These should be a lot faster to plant, a lot easier. I just hope that the end result's just as good. And all we've got to do to get these out, I use my finger, you can use a gardening implement if you like, but I like to grab a clump out, and then with the clump loose from the pot, tease each single onion out, and there's one. To be fair, it's not lost many of its root, so these should do really well. And to get them in the ground, that's the dibber. It's going to be as simple as making a hole in the ground, dropping the onion in, and then closing the ground up around it, all with the dibber. So I'm just giving me back a break from planting onions for 5 minutes. And I thought I'd walk into the little orchard. Everything's in bloom at the minute. Some of these apple trees are absolutely covered with blossom. They look great right now, but hopefully, if we don't get a good frost, we should have trees absolutely loaded with apples later on in the year. So this particular apple tree behind me is a Braeburn. It really did quite well last year. It must have had about 100 apples on it, as big as your fist. But it didn't have half as much blossom as it has this year. So fingers crossed for a bumper harvest, and we'll be able to make some cider. That's what we're after. I like eating apples and I like drinking apple juice, but it's nice to get some homemade cider. The cherry tree's had a bit of blossom on this year, but for some reason it's not doing very well where it's planted. It might be due to the fact that it's quite close to this apple tree, where in fact it's in close proximity to all the apple trees. So it might be a case of overcrowding, but hopefully it'll pick up. The plum trees down the bottom of the garden have had their blossom. You can't see any now. But you can see that there is some fruit starting to grow. And this pear tree, littered with blossom this year. This is a Concord pear. We only had about 3 or 4 pears off this tree last autumn. Fingers crossed for a few more this year. And this is a Conference. It's had a bit of blossom. and the rhubarb's starting to put up some stalks. And over there we've got 3 more apple trees. We're just starting to clear this area. This is where we used to raise our chickens, but now we've got all the ground at the farm. They stay down there, so we'll find another purpose for this area. This particular tree and cooking apple, again, more blossom this year than it's ever had. It's growing in a funny way. It's had a tough life, bless it, being in with the chickens. They tended to eat all the blossom and all the buds. And 2 more apple trees. Again, lots of blossom, looking really good. So all the apple trees, in fact all the fruit trees, are looking really well this year. Loads of blossom. Let's just hope that they can keep it all and turn most of that into good fruit. So that's the orchard tour for middle of April 2022. I'm going to go and bust me back a little more and go and put some more onions in the ground. So I've planted out all the onions that I want to plant. We've got 9 rows of 20, that's 180 onions. If they grow to real big globe sized onions, that will see us through for a full year. And you can see the size difference between the onions that were planted in the single cells or pricked out into the single cells versus the onions that were left in the tray. But I'm quite confident that these ones that were left in the tray will catch up. And I've left myself just enough room at the end of this row to get a couple of rows of the brassica in. I've got some Calabrese broccoli to get in the ground. They're desperate to get out their pots, so I'll go and grab another tool out the shed and get these put to bed. So that's all the space I've got for the moment to get these broccoli in. What I need to do tomorrow is fork over some more of this ground, loosen it up, and I'll be able to get another row of broccoli in next to these. But we've got all the onions in that I want to get in this season. 1 row of broccoli. Feels good to get something in the ground. It's like putting money in the bank. So that's me done for today. I'll be back here soon. I've got some beetroot in some modular pots. They're going to need to go out soon. Some broad beans just coming through. So I need to clear a load more space because I want to cram it this year. make the most of what little space I've got. But that's all we've got time for. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.